Virtual Summit 2022.
Good evening one and all, and good evening to all of the 2,000 people in the audience watching us right now. We welcome you to the Evolving Global Energy Outlook session. When we stepped into January 2022, none of us could have imagined how the world would change in the subsequent few weeks. Recovering from a pandemic, inflation on a global scale, supply chain difficulties, volatility of the energy markets, and finally the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And what has emerged in these past couple of months is, how energy is at the center of it all, and rising energy prices are putting post-pandemic recovery at risk. Energy security within energy transitions has become a top priority for nations, and energy transition is not really a quick fix, and it will need years of successful and sort of patient navigation. And the current energy landscape has also put a lot of pressure on the politics of clean energy. So to discuss these significant geopolitical developments and shifts, and the pressure on fossil fuels, the pressure to move towards cleaner energy mix, while the renewables are slow in their development to satisfy our energy-hungry world in the middle of a transforming energy system, I introduce our esteemed panel today. To start with, I want to introduce Ambassador Navtej Sarna. Ambassador Sarna was India's ambassador to the United States, and as a member of the Indian Foreign Service, he also served as India's High Commissioner to the UK, Ambassador to the State of Israel, and Secretary at the MEA. He's also an established author of fiction and non-fiction, and has been a prolific columnist and commentator on policy, literary, and cultural matters, contributing regularly to journals in India and abroad. We welcome you, sir. Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad is our first panelist. He served as an Indian ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the UAE. He was also Additional Secretary for International Cooperation in the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, and Director General of the ICWA. He has authored 4 books, and his latest, being West Asia at War, Repression, Resistance, and Great Power Games, was released just last month. He also writes regularly in Indian and West Asian media. Our second panelist, Mr. Praveen Gupta, was the founding MD and CEO of Raheja QBE General Insurance, and was part of the key founding management team at Bajaj Alliance General Insurance. During his 40 years in the industry, he worked with both public and private sectors in India and overseas, and he has had first-hand experience of the oil and energy and hydrocarbon sector, working in Gujarat while servicing their insurance and risk management needs. He actively writes on climate change and energy transition issues at Diversity Blog. Our final participant, Mr. Subhomoy Bhattacharjee. Subhomoy is the consulting editor at Business Standard newspaper. He works on public policy, primarily finance, energy, and urban issues. His latest book, India's Coal Story, traces how India's coal reserves were at the center of a major political scandal, and explores why, since independence, Indian businesses and government could not settle the rights on energy security. So that's about it from my end, and I now hand over the stage to Ambassador Sarna, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for putting together this very distinguished panel, who bring a huge amount of experience from different aspects of the energy question, if I may say so, besides other things. So my idea would be that during this 1 hour that we have, we take advantage of their very varied experience and the different points of view that they may bring to the table, and really give what is called the 30,000-foot view on the energy issues. I think there have been several experts in different sessions here who have already talked in detail about different energy issues. And here, I think we'd like to take as wide a look as possible, of course. So I think, as far as I see it today, when we look at the newspapers or listen to the news and the post-pandemic world, as far as energy is concerned, there are 2 hugely contradictory trends happening here. And one is the code red alerts that have been issued by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, by the UN Secretary General. And they have said that really mankind has no time to waste if we have to have a fighting chance of keeping global warming to up to 1.5 degrees centigrade by the turn of the century. At the moment, just with 1.1 degree warming, we are having all sorts of things: unprecedented heat waves, wildfires. A 1,200 square kilometer Antarctica continent shelf fell into the ocean a few days ago. Your Amazon rainforest, the Gulf Stream, the Greenland ice sheet, everything is reaching a tipping point very soon. And communities are already losing habitat and health and their means of living, particularly the coastal communities. So a lot of warning signs are there for us. And the follow-up to that is that fossil fuel usage has to peak by 2025. It has to halve, in terms of emissions have to halve by 2030. And the world has to get to net zero or carbon neutrality by 2050. In sharp contradiction to this trend is the post-Ukraine conflict trend, which is like fossil fuels is back on the front page. I mean, you hear more about OPEC than you've heard about it in decades. And suddenly, people are building new pipelines, gas pipelines. There's news that the UK is going to maximize its North Sea oil and gas production. The US is hitting a record production of oil and gas. It is pumping more LNG into Europe. Projects which had been held back on environmental grounds, like the Norway-Polish pipeline, have now been cleared. So we are back towards increasing fossil fuels. I know that everybody will say this is a transitionary step, etc., etc., etc. But here I really do want to bring in Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad, because this is essentially a geopolitical question. It's a geo-economic question. It's an area on which he has vast amount of practical experience and as well as academic depth. And I'd like you, sir, to tell us, have we reached an inflection point that we will turn away from fossil fuels, or are we backsliding? And how do you see this happening in the next few years?
You know, the factual position is that the international community consistently gives lip service to issues relating to climate change, but actually it is business as usual. I've seen this as a pattern over the last 15 or 20 years, and I don't see anything changing in the near future. The reason is very clear. Political leaders have to contend with the here and now. They have to deal with energy-related issues, with energy prices, with the well-being of their communities, and they have to face elections every few years. And this is a very sensitive matter. Hence, while they are genuinely committed to climate change-related matters, they can't do very much about it because it needs a lot of investment. It needs a fundamental change in terms of how we do business pertaining to energy. Now, that kind of money, no country is able to set aside. We have concerns right now. I mean, even as you and I are sitting in Delhi, look at the prices that are there at the various petrol pumps. So I would say to you, we are looking at, for the next 30 years, at a fossil fuel future. Regardless of what anybody may say, if I have to provide energy security for my country, and my energy security is directly linked with the energy security of the international community, because energy is a one single integrated market, I have to take my country safely to the next 30 years. We are looking at massive increases in the demand for fossil fuels globally. As far as India is concerned, our energy consumption between now and 2040 is projected at about 88 or 90%. Our oil demand for the next 30 years is projected at increasing at 90% from what it is today. So we have to take this into account. And I'm not sure how we are going to make that transition. We are wedded to fossil fuel. Every projection that I have read regardless of the lip service that people might give. And I know some people may not like to hear what I'm saying. I'm speaking very, very factually. Look at the figures. Every projection that anybody has ever made seriously is looking at a fossil fuel. 80%. Look at India. 80% of our energy consumption, based on Government of India reports, up to 2040, is looking at fossil fuels. No change with regard to the consumption of coal, oil, and gas. They taken together in India will be constituting more than 80% of our energy mix. Look at the global figures coming from diverse sources. All of them are looking at a fossil fuel future. So I thought I would intervene right at the outset and give a reality check.
So I'm going to jump straight to Praveen and just ask him what Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad has said. Do you think I think the green future is just a pipe dream, only lip service? And then I'd like to come to Subhomoy after that to see that if it is, and what Ambassador Ahmad says is correct, then what would be the kind of breakup of the fossil fuel consumption? At the moment, I'd like to keep it global, and we come down to India a bit later. So, Praveen, would you like to come in on this?
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Ambassador Navtej Sarna and Ambassador Ahmad for giving a very, I would say, candid story out there, and it kind of someone who is now spending a lot of time in the climate space, it is a shocking reality. In fact, when Ambassador Sarna asked you about the inflection point, I think the inflection point would ideally be, if to quote Carbon Tracker CEO, basically that from today's 14%, how can we take renewable energy to 40% overall part of the pie by 2030. Basically also moving towards electrification and efficiency as a key driver enabled by renewables, green hydrogen. Every day there's a kind of a seesaw situation there. This morning when I woke up, I saw someone very authentic criticizing it and saying it is another GHG. Sustainable biomass is again controversial. But the fact remains that there are very many compelling reasons why the world leaders and the global economies, all sizes, all shades, need to look at it. 85 million jobs in the new economy that the renewable energy promises, and as against a loss of 12 million jobs. I mean, these are very serious numbers. Again, the benefits are very obvious. We all know those, and I won't want to spend too much time. But the main concern is what really happens if we continue behaving the way we believe is the business as usual, which Ambassador Ahmad, you kept saying. Now, the fact of the matter is that I keep borrowing Tom Friedman's quote, which says that we've started seeing Mother Nature pushing Father Greed, and Father Greed is nothing but pumping out more and more oil and gas and playing with the price and hoping that this is the way that the world will be. But this is not the way the world will be. I happened to just look at some of the slides the previous speakers had put there, and they were talking about maximizing extraction of oil and gas and shortage of water. Now, water is a key constituent, and where is water? Our coal plants are seriously running out of water. Our country, we've had serious topsoil issue. We have groundwater issues. I don't know how we can continuously and continually follow the business as usual. The other thing is the amount of heat that goes in. Again, I thought I'll bring in very gory numbers, 400,000 Hiroshima bombs is what we put inside Mother Earth every day due to human activity. Now, how can someone be mindless to it? Anyone, whether this is a prince of Saudi or someone from the Rockefeller family or a Russian oligarch or anyone else, don't they have children? Don't they have grandchildren? Don't they have future generations to think of? How can you be so mindless? This is not about like, okay, once I'm dead, the planet can die. I don't think anyone thinks like that. But is that what it is coming to? Certainly not. The ecosystem collapse is writ large. We don't need to go anywhere to really witness it. The Arctic and largest and highest mass of snow or ice or frozen water, whatever you call it, is in our neighborhood, in the Himalayas. The whatever you call it, the Himalayas, Hindu Kush, the Himalayan Tibetan plateau. It's under such serious threat. The glaciers are melting. I've been following some research. The Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Seattle recently disclosed some numbers, and there are scientists studying all these polar or polar-like ice caps everywhere, and they realize the amount of biomass or fossil fuel discharges that go and sit as carbon particles on the glaciers in the Tibetan plateau, the Himalayan region, is causing glacier melt. And this will pace up the melt of glaciers much faster than what we have anticipated. I don't think the IPCC, with due respect, is also factoring that in, which is sad. A 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature rises the humidity by 7%. And the wind storms, the wind speed, the speed of wind storms goes up by 8 meters per second for every 1 degree temperature rise. Now that's what the killer storms and cyclones or hurricanes, what we talk about, are about. The planetary boundaries have been, one after the other. There are 9 planetary boundaries which have been identified. Out of 9, 6 have already been crashed. So we have just 3 more to, we can take pride and, that masculine, whatever sense of gory feeling if we want to induce, we can take pride in it. But this is destroying the planet. This is destroying all other species faster than any time ever in not just human history, but the 4+ billion years of history of this planet.
So Praveen, if I take what you are saying, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to take this point of what we have reached between the two speakers, we have a completely contradictory appreciation of what's happening in the world, where I thought I started, and we still have that you have the hard politic, real thinking, and then you have almost the if I may say so, the science plus the idealistic world of how energy should be doing. So Subhomoy, where do you come in on this? There is you're an expert on energy, and there's an International Energy Agency report which says that production of coal, oil and gas needs to decrease by 11%, 4% and 3% respectively through the year. Now, this is not an IPCC till 2030. This is not an IPCC report. It's not a climate report. It's an International Energy Agency report. So, but what we hear is that actually everybody's increasing their fuel production. So, do you think that is the way we are going to look forward to in terms of a global energy, this thing? And then after that, we'll have to see where India fits into this. You're on mute.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for calling me to this session. And as I already anticipated right at the beginning, It's going to be a rich session to learn a lot from. Thank you, Ambassador Sarna. Thank you, Ambassador Ahmad and Praveen, dear friend, Sanjit, for having brought me here. I would say that the commitment to veer away from fossil fuel is not lip service, and I'll strongly disagree with what Ambassador Sarna is saying. Let me just put in numbers. There are 235 institutional investors representing $58 trillion in assets who have already committed to align their portfolios with net zero. And this is the Global Head of Sustainability Research giving. In addition, 92 banks globally, representing 40% of global banking assets, are already on the way to decarbonize their lending and investment portfolios. So the movement towards net zero is not lip service. There are serious money coming into it. That's one thing. It is not working well is a point very well taken from what Ambassador Ahmad was saying, that there are issues there. But then none of us expected that the transition away from fossil fuel will not be messy. What we are seeing now is essentially the clash of both, that there is a real commitment and people are putting money into the transition. Companies are actually changing their portfolios. Exxon has had to include in their board of directors members who would be representing a thrust towards renewable energy. It wouldn't have happened unless the shareholders had pushed them. So it is not about people just saying and not doing it. That's the first part of it. But having said that, why is it that it's not happening to the extent and the scary scenario that Praveen is pointing out? Well, it is not happening to the extent that we would want it to. But I would make the distinction that it is happening definitely in terms of the transition. The transition is definitely happening. The scale at which we would want it is slower. And what does the present conflict do to it? Well, my sense is that the present conflict more or less underscores what we had always felt in the global energy dialogue, that Europe is frankly not a very serious partner in this energy transition. And I say this with a lot of authority because if we look at the Worldometer's data on who are the world's largest importers of oil and natural gas, other than USA, in the top 20 of the global gas consumption, if you look at that list, you'd be surprised to find that European countries do not figure before the first 10. United States, the next one that comes along is United Kingdom. Ditto for oil. The world dialogue on oil and gas, despite the fact that Europe would want to discuss it and would want to get into the discussion, they are not the primary determinants. That in the list of the daily oil consumption, China is number 2, India is number 3, Japan is number 4, Russia is 5, Saudi Arabia 6. The first European country that comes in the list is Germany at number 10. What it means is that gas or oil consumption, technology, finance, and demand and supply issues will be determined by non-European actors, essentially Asia. And my sense is Asian countries are far more responsible about the energy transition despite being the largest consumers of oil and gas. Throughout the time from when the Kyoto protocol came in and from there on, I have not seen, and there I would like to hear more from Ambassador Sarna, no Asian countries have backtracked on their commitment. this is an important part to understand. We are not only the largest consumers, we are also the most serious committers on the transition to renewable energy. What is happening in Europe about the gas and oil issues is what I might call an irritating side story about the global transition that is happening. Even if today Norway to UK, the pipeline that's been talked about, the Norwegian pipeline, or even if Gazprom decides to pump in more oil into Europe, more gas into Europe, that will not change the fact that Europe essentially is a site failure. It is impossible to think that the volume of trade in the Indian Ocean on gas that happens from Qatar to China, India, and Japan will turn towards Europe. They neither have the ability nor is it expected. It is, the cataclysmic change with these countries in Asia will block off, and which actually it is seeming to. By what we are essentially seeing is that there's a rebalancing happening even more in terms of who are the leaders in deciding the energy scenario. If we look at the number of refineries that are coming in, as the last point I'm saying, all the refineries, if you look at the number of refineries in Europe, which are being shut down and in the name of being taken up for repair, being shut down this year is actually substantial. Many of them are now suddenly being wrenched back to say, no, you got to produce a bit more. But those are coming to India, Japan, and to Asia. Essentially, the story of the energy transition will be Asia-led, Asian-dominated, and I think the problem that is coming along is that there is a bit of extra cash that the European countries with their banks have, which is sort of irritating this entire journey. If we can sort that out, then I would say that basically connecting the finance with the consumption, I think a lot of our problem on the energy issues and the energy challenge will be much more simpler and easier to understand. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's opened up a huge number of questions, and I'll see if we have time to come down back to them one-on-one. But I think the first one I'd like to take up and throw it towards Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad is this point that you make that the transition is going to be, and there's a sub-transition in what you said, because actually there's a transition. Gas is seen itself as a transition. Now, whether or not that is a transition is an open question, because some people are saying that it's, that's just eyewash or greenwash or whatever you call it, that it's actually, it's the kind of methane that's produced in the extraction and transmission of gas, etc., etc. And people are seeing it as an easy way of delaying real climate change. One is that issue. And secondly, what you said about, Asia being the hub, the Middle East and Asia. And here, I'd like to see what Ambassador Ahmad seems to thinks about it, given his long years in the Middle East. Is the Middle East going to continue, from what Subhomoy tells us, as the large exporter of oil and gas? I mean, as far as Asia is concerned, that's where it's coming from. For whether we call Iran Middle East or not is a separate question. But whether it's Iran, Qatar, it's Saudi. And so is this going to remain the geopolitical center of energy for the forthcoming few years? And then we have a large number of questions which have come up, which I hope to turn back to later.
Yeah. First, very quickly, every energy transition historically has been messy, has been difficult. When we moved from human and animal power to coal, you remember the devastation that we had all across Europe, where you had to shift from agriculture and move on to industry, and the social and cultural toll this took, and the exploitation of women and children, all of that is well known. When we shifted from coal in favor of oil, it was geopolitical. You had the occupation of countries, you had European powers coming in, and it was also propelled forward because of war, the First World War and the Second World War. So energy became a strategic asset, and that is what we have today. There is now a genuine commitment in favor of change. What I'm suggesting is that this change is not happening as well as it should because of the lethargy, the immediate commitments that you have versus the long-term interests that you have committed yourself to. Now, when we look at this, is going to remain, and it will the transition will happen. We only don't know when it will be. You remember some years ago it was supposed to be nuclear energy. That was the holy grail as far as energy transition was concerned. Clean and safe, and it would be all over the place, very cheap once you have set up. And then you had Fukushima, and you took many steps backward because of that. So there will always be various issues. And then we always have the ugly shadow of geopolitics. Because, because oil and gas are strategic assets, there is bound to be geopolitics. And because you have a single market as far as energy is concerned, anything that happens in one place will be impacting on some other place. Why do we focus so much on West Asia? Because West Asia has the largest global reserves. Very small countries, very many of them very small countries with very high potential, and they are likely to have reserves which will go on for the next 40 to 50 years as far as present production is concerned. There are two concerns that have been flagged, and I should quickly address those. Number one, that a short period of disenchantment as far as fossil fuels are concerned had reduced investment as far as fresh development is concerned. And there are bitter complaints coming from West Asian producers that you are the ones who were abusing us up to now, and therefore we didn't produce, we didn't invest, and therefore you are suffering a shortage. Spare capacity globally has shrunk quite a bit, even as geopolitics has curtailed supplies from crucial suppliers like Iran, Venezuela, and now Russia. So that is one aspect. And the other is we are not making the big discoveries that we used to make earlier. That is another. That you see, there is going to be a natural limit to how much you can do. Now, with regard to technology, we have expanded the base quite significantly. You will recall we were told we had peaked in terms of oil availability of oil in the 1960s or thereabout. And we had technology that has given us so much now. I think that we have enough oil and gas available for the next 30 to 40 years to meet global needs. What you have is the fluctuations relating to price. And that is simply because of global geopolitics. That if you never have a scenario where everything is perfectly peaceful. It's never going to happen. Every time something or the other happens and the whole world is affected. So we have that. We have enough supplies. And each individual country has, I think Saudi Arabia, though we've not made major discoveries, we have enough supplies till 2040, 2050. During this period, this is what the West Asian producers are saying, that we have to live together, we have to live side by side. We are also committed to transition. We also want to move forward. Now, very quickly, you had raised the issue relating to natural gas. Now, natural gas is seen as something that we should be committing ourselves to, because the carbon footprint of natural gas is significantly lower than coal. Having said this, a lot of countries in the world, the United States, China, India, and some others are committed to coal. Germany, committed to coal, because you have coal. If I have so much coal available at home, very cheaply, I'm not going to give it up. And it has not happened. We may develop technologies relating to clean coal. And indeed, where some years ago, when Mr. Iyer was the petroleum minister, we were talking about coal-producing countries cooperating with each other and develop technologies relating to clean coal. Because we have so much coal and we are never going to go away. The projections relating to India, for example, show that we are going to be dependent on coal to the extent of 50% in our energy mix up to 2040 and perhaps beyond. So I think I think natural gas is a very natural substitute. And yet, why has it not happened in India? You are very aware that we talk about natural gas, and yet natural gas today is about 6% in the national energy mix. And the maximum it will ever become in 2040, lip service to about 12 or 13%, but reality of 9%. With all the effort. And this is due to people say that we already have an existing infrastructure. We have coal deposits. We have got, it's very well organized, an extremely well organized mafia as well, taking care of various things. Natural gas is seen as something from the outside. We have a little at home, but you have to import it. And there is no sync. And even now there is no coordination between the importer of natural gas, that is the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, and the user of natural gas, that is the Power Ministry. The Power Ministry is committed to coal. And that is the scenario. When we were promoting natural gas, we were very, very active and robust, and we were looking at 15% in our energy mix. And it has not gone beyond 6%, even today. We were looking at transnational pipelines from Iran, Pakistan, India. We were looking at Myanmar, Bangladesh, India. We were looking at TAPI. All of these pipes, none of them has actually been achieved. And we are also, even now, we have set up terminals for natural gas, but there are no takers. Natural gas is considered so much more expensive than coal per unit that our power sector doesn't want to move to natural gas. Therefore, it is being used in industry, but not in power.
That really reminds me, actually takes me back to arms control days, because this is the same kind of thing that happens in arms control when there was a huge push to prohibit landmines, and everybody said, no, my landmines are good, yours are bad. Because you must make them what I make them, and I'll sell you what you need, because so it all became commerce, and people used to say, what is mine, what is yours is landmine. So this is what used to happen, and this is exactly what you are saying. But I think I just go back to Praveen with some of the things that Subhomoy said. In particular, he made very strong points backed by figures as to how much the banks are committed, how much the corporate, from what the common feeling seems to be that the main people behind delaying climate change are the fossil fuel big 5 or 6 or whatever companies there are, and about they are responsible for 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the last 30 years. And what they are saying that they will be doing in terms of changing their profile is very speculative. The technologies, for instance, for carbon capture, etc., are very, very weak and initial. So is this, given your experience in the corporate insurance world, is this real, the change in the heart and soul of the corporate world? Is it real in terms of, the ESG label that we talk about? Because I read articles about this huge company in New York, which I think is called Maskey or something like that, which, whose every ESG label has been questioned because they made McDonald's, they gave McDonald's an up mark in ESG when it is the biggest producer or consumer of beef and huge amounts of GHG. So what do you say to that?
Sure, thank you. That's a great provocation. Thank you for that. Now, very quickly, just
to fight, so that's the whole thing.
Sorry?
I want you to fight with each other.
Yeah, that's what I'm coming to. I don't have the gloves, but so be it. First counter. Ambassador Ahmad is a master of oil and gas. And someday I want to sit across and talk to him more. But the point is, we have reached a point of no return. And, while oil and gas may be plentiful, 30, 40 years, Mr. Bezos may lay a pipeline from Moon or Mars, and all kinds of possibilities can continue. But the point is, how long can our planet tolerate oil and gas, given the parameters we just talked about? 2, capital supply. And that is linked to what Ambassador Sarna just raised in terms of banks and insurers. So basically, there are a whole lot of banks, and some of them are the biggest villains. The money doesn't now go from the government. The banks are the money pipeline for oil and energy. JP Morgan is the world's largest financier of oil and gas, and it is the villain number one. It signs all agreements, but it goes back on each one of them. So we saw that at Glasgow. They signed whatever it was called, GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Net Zero Alliance. We had all kinds of corporates, insurers who signed up the Net Zero Alliance. The insurers did their NZIA, the bankers did NZBA, whatever it was. The point is, each one is sitting tight. And when it comes to insurers, out of 18 who signed for net zero, only 6 have stopped insuring oil and gas, and almost everyone has stopped doing new projects of coal, but they're still doing the old projects of coal. And there's a lot of activism being fueled by it, particularly in the US, Australia, very interestingly, and much of Europe. The Green New Deal, which was supposed to be a baby of America, is probably doing much better in Europe. And it's putting a lot of pressure on the governments, and they have to come out with something. Biden made a commitment, but again, thanks to the new emerging reality, he has to drill more oil, drill more gas. The point is, there's a lot of hype in terms of ESG. ESG is a great concept, like the triple bottom line. It kind of wishes to put people and the planet before profits. But unfortunately, all these big oil companies make so much profit. And the big fund managers, BlackRock, Blackstone, State Street, you name them, each one of them says one thing and does another thing. And if something has to be done, which Ambassador Ahmad raised, which my friend Subhomoy has mentioned, I think it's the disciplining of the money pipeline that is required. And the activists are getting there. I'm telling you, whatever we may say today and may come to a conclusion now, ultimately it's the activism. You look at engine number one, the company which is just a very small hedge fund company. While Subhomoy, you mentioned Exxon as one of the great champion of oil energy, and which is investing in a big way. It is full of hypocrisy, and that has been exposed again and again. Shell got caught on that. They were trading with Russia and they were talking about being against Russia, but they got exposed. So that's, Ambassador Sarna, the reality behind the scene. There's gross hypocrisy, but there's so much of corporate activism. The CEOs, the board members are getting sued now. Like as an insurer of, say, management liability, we are seeing that corporate action on the back of climate change is the thing happening. I know young lawyers who are giving up everything and getting into corporate activism and getting into climate activism with as a legal practice. Last but not the least, there's so much of what you call bad blood that the oil energy has created. Young people don't want to work for oil energy companies. Young people don't want to work for PR companies, which are one of the biggest, what you call, the impression makers. Law firms which work for oil energy companies, banks which fund oil energy companies. So the pressure is humongous. And so whatever assumptions we make and conclusions we reach at will miss the bus if we don't factor in these aspects.
Excellent. I think the stage is really set to see how it happens after the immediate sort of irritant, as Subhomoy called it, of the European developments, and see how this goes. But I want to come back to Subhomoy. You made a very interesting point about the commitment and sincerity of, say, Asian countries in terms of commitments that they make. And I presume you mean India and China, presumably. and though we may not always agree on many things, but in international negotiations on climate change, India and China till a long time were almost on this, the same path, and then they went slightly, they diverged. But the fact is that there is this very strong idea that we need time for development. And, so you cannot impose, there is a historical responsibility that you have, you messed it up, you sort it out, and we need time for development. So we cannot give you commitments beyond which we can. And at least India has always been very serious on international commitments which we take. Otherwise, we don't take them. We have any number of important treaties which we haven't signed. But from there, I would like to ask you to tell us, now focus it down to India. Given our international commitments, our national determinations that we have given, our own sense of climate change for India, forget what's happening to the world, the vulnerability of our agriculture, the vulnerability of our 7,500 kilometer coastline. Given all this, do you think our present energy mix is what it should be and can be, or can we have improvements? You're on mute. Yeah.
You're right. Mr. Sarna, what you're saying is absolutely right. What I see from Ambassador Ahmad and what Praveen is saying that, look, people are not being sincere enough. And Ambassador Ahmad is saying that it's really come along. I mean, it's not going to happen. What I'm trying to say is that serious money is coming on the table. And it's not because of somebody's evangelism. Much as somebody might say that I want to work on energy issues because I think I care for the world, I don't think that is the way in which the world will be saved. It has to be good enough money. The answer to what you're asking, that whether is India doing adequately enough, there's a parliament reply that came up last week from the Ministry of Coal, where there was a specific question that is there an energy transition happening away from coal? And the coal ministry said clearly, in India, energy transition away from coal is not happening in foreseeable future. Now this, although there will be a push for renewable, non-renewable energy, but share of coal in the energy basket is going to remain significant in the years ahead. Now this is a parliament reply. Now, you know very well that ministries do not give such a reply, written reply in parliament unless they've got reasons to, they're absolutely clear. Yet it is also clear that at Glasgow, Prime Minister has made a commitment that we are moving towards a particular share of non-renewable energy. So what does that mean? It means essentially that we are always recalculating how much is the extent of fossil fuel load that we can take, correcting it and going forward. It will fall foul at times. And obviously smart analysts will be able to find out where there are flaws. But I don't regard that as a problem. I regard that as part of the energy calculation that's happening, and it's bound to happen in a world economy, even in an Indian economy of 1.4 billion people. You'll have to keep on recalculating how much energy, how much it will be the mix and match. It is going to be a difficult exercise, but there's no doubt that the changeover is happening. The Ministry of Coal is pushing for coal. The Ministry of Petroleum would be looking for more oil fields. But at the same time, all their efforts together, along with that of renewable energy, is pushing for a viable energy mix that is in consonance with what the world needs. So that has to be made absolutely clear. And I therefore bring again the issue of what is happening in China and other Asian countries. Most of them, in fact, all of them seem to be calculating on the same premise. And because the demand for oil and gas is going to come from these countries, not from Europe, it is what their calculations do is so significant. Let us not get distracted by what is happening in Europe. Europe is simply raising the price. By raising the price, that can affect the fiscal deficit of a country, that can disturb the country's balance of payments in a way. But it doesn't suddenly change from renewable to non-renewable or any other way. It simply makes a path more costly. And countries are annoyed about it. Asian countries are making it clear to Russia that we don't like what you're doing. So I don't think this part has to be understood well, that the change that's happening is definitely there. The calculations are being made continuously. The Ukraine-Russia crisis has made it costlier. It has not stopped the process. This is something fundamentally very, very clear. I think that is something that needs to be understood. I know Praveen takes a lot of evangelical support on the issue about people being committed to environment issues. I, as a business journalist, I would say that I would rather believe in the greed of the people to get money from renewable energy, which will drive the push towards renewable energy. The reason why investors have driven out board members from different companies and will do so in more measure will not be because that they think this is a good thing, but because they see that at the end of the day, their dollar can sweat more by bringing in RE rather than bringing in fossil fuel. Till the extent that it could bring in fossil fuel was giving them good money, they were happy. But since the entire taxonomy of change that's happening is shifting the economics more in favor of RE, so investors are saying, I want the money. The numbers I talked about initially, that's from the Morgan Stanley report, essentially build on the same premise, that there's more money to be made from RE, so therefore let's go in there. And that is how it will happen. Whether that will be good enough in good time for us to stave off a calamity, well, that is a question. That is what is called the entire Earth question. And that is something on which I don't think any one of us can take a stock on right now. But that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think from what we gather till now is, yes, fossil fuels are here to stay. Coal is here to stay, particularly as far as we are concerned. Change is happening. Maybe it's not happening fast enough. But one thing that, for instance, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has shown us, Ambassador Ahmad, is how critically dependent we are on imports. And Subhomoy just made the same point in terms of, and yes, we are 80% importers of our oil. And it's from a rather unstable part of the world, and oil prices are always up for existing. So how do you see us in the future, given this entire scenario, looking after our energy security? If the solar, etc., is going to increase, but going to increase at incremental levels, if coal is going to stay, and our coal is not the best of coal in the world, so maybe we start thinking of importing coal at some stage. Plus, our oil and natural gas coming across the oceans. How does it look in terms of security?
The projections are there already. Niti Aayog made the projections in 2017. It remains a draft report because there was no consensus. It's a report that gives lip service to climate change and renewables, but the facts and figures that the report puts down on paper have been predicting a fossil fuel future. Coal, as I mentioned earlier, is 50% of our energy mix today, and is likely to be 50% of our energy mix in 2040. Today, we are importing 30% of our coal needs. 30% of our coal needs are being imported. And if you look at the future, depending on the kind of scenario, whether you are business as usual or you are able to do real change on the ground, it's either 51% if it is business as usual, or if there is real change in favor of renewables, it is likely to be 26%. 26%, 30%. You are still looking at massive increases in coal imports. Oil, we are looking at almost the same scenario. We are importing 83% today, 85%. In 2040, Niti Aayog tells us it is going to be between 86 and 90% imports. Where gas is concerned, we are importing 57%. If there is a magical increase in domestic production, we could be importing a lot more, or we would have shifted to some other sources. My own analysis has shown the history of energy transition is very difficult. It shows how difficult it is. Number one, there is immense lethargy. The system doesn't want to change. There is an infrastructure in place, cultivated over a 100-year period, and there are powerful vested interests wedded to those sources. What you are asking whenever we have to do transition is major investments in change, for which there is a certain degree of reluctance and a pushback from the vested source, from the vested interest. Second, we always have to look at the economics. At some stage, there will be a break even, and then you will find more and more renewables will appear to be competitive. Already there are figures coming out that certain times renewables are more economical, or they are as economical as existing. But constantly we have issues because infrastructure hasn't caught up, technology hasn't caught up. For example, wind. There's a massive investment in wind in a certain country, and overnight, because of storms, the wind wasn't there to the extent you needed, and you had to shift away. Where did you shift? Coal and oil and gas. So that is where. So what you finally have is hybrid. Yeah, and hybrid is when different energy sources work at the same time. And I think we could be looking at that. I am quite clear in my mind that fossil fuels in some shape or form will be with us for several years to come. Why do we put the limit of 20% up to 2040 or 2050, which are the projections these days, is because we don't want to go beyond that. We don't know. The world will change in certain fundamental ways. So this is seen as the foreseeable future. For energy projection, foreseeable future, next 25 to 30 years. And then we make certain assumptions on that basis. Where are we looking at in future? Number one, because we still do term contracts and we want assured supplies, I think West Asia will remain a very major supplier. Yes, the region is unstable. But having said this, let me point out, the last time we had a real disruption in supplies was after Iraq occupied Kuwait. For the last 30 years, there has been no disruption in supply as far as we are concerned. And I think that is the way you will find. And hopefully, if the scenario improves, it will be better. If you have a region-wide conflagration, then of course we are looking at a very different situation. What India has done is that we are getting some small quantities of oil from very different countries. Today we have 42 sources of supply. But having said this, let's not start singing a song, because 10% on that, the top 10 suppliers take care of more than 80% of our needs. So the balance is from the spot market. And spot market, government companies don't buy from the spot market, or they are reluctant because there is a very high degree of personal decision making, and we are a little concerned about the integrity of that transaction. Private companies, on the other hand, like Reliance, happily do a lot of transactions on the spot market. So hence we have diversified. Nigeria, even USA. USA has now become the number 4 supplier. But I think this is a temporary situation because the US wanted to have a certain space in the Indian market. USA is now focusing more and more on Europe. So you could see a shift in that regard. And you may see that our dependence on West Asia, and therefore the centrality of West Asia as far as India's energy security is concerned, is likely to remain intact.
Well, thank you. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, but I think they have more or less been answered by the discussion. One was the impact of Russia-Ukraine on India's energy, and the second, that why shouldn't we continue to use hydrocarbons? Why should we take burden of the West? But I think we've covered that in both these. But I'd like to end this with, perhaps Praveen, you can start, and then if the other panelists would like to come in, can come up with a concluding comment on this, because you said West Asia will retain its centrality. But if we move more towards renewables, The world moves more towards renewables in 30, 40 years. Are we looking at new geopolitical centers? You have 40% of the Atacama Desert. You have nickel being mined in New Caledonia, 10% of the world's reserves. Are we really looking at a different geopolitical centers coming up in the next 30, 40 years? And I think we do have time just for quick comments. So anybody, Praveen, would you like to wind up with this and then we can check with you?
Thank you. While I'm not anywhere near an expert, but as a student of all these disruptors, I'm very fascinated by these prospects. And yes, like for instance, ONGC Videsh made an investment in something in the Arctic Circle, courtesy Russian investment invitation. And the idea was to reach out to whatever that is plentifully available. It's not just oil and gas, but it's cobalt, nickel, and many other rare minerals and metals that will go into making of our renewable energy gadgetry. The same things also with regard to scraping and digging into the ocean surface. All kinds of these fancy science fiction kind of stuff comes in, but a lot of what and where this originates from is very unstable region. It can cause hell of a lot of other disruptive forces. China has already made significant moves, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Australia. It's bought a whole lot of mines and interests in Africa. And I don't know, a lot of companies are committing to invest in big time giga factories. One just announced in Karnataka, 7,000-8,000 crores. Now, all these can become stranded assets. So one is we need to have fear. While Subhomoy mentioned greed, I would think with greed, fear needs to come in. And perhaps the governance of energy space needs to change. We need to have an overarching ministry which looks after transportation, construction, oil, gas, everything together, including climate change, so that all these aspects can be corrected and addressed quickly rather than wait to be disrupted and then see how the rest of the world is addressing. Those are my quick thoughts.
Subhomoy?
No, I would not look at an overarching ministry. I don't think that sort of thing serves any problem, any purpose. Well, the problem that's coming along, Ambassador Sarna, and you pointed out rightly, about the new geopolitical hotspots is absolutely correct. And I would look at it again from the consumption point of view, that since the major consumers will again be, for renewable also, the countries of Asia, there has to be more of dialogue within them. What Europe is now doing is essentially excising itself out of the world production community. They do not need solar. They also will not be in a position to produce solar or any other renewable energy. And neither do they have the technology, they're already behind. It's China and other countries in Asia which are taking the lead. Now that's where it means that countries in Asia, like OPEC of Europe, need to understand and come to a settlement of how to handle these geopolitical tensions, because many of them are in very poor countries. And I think that is a point which needs to be pushed very hard. It is something that these new guys will have to sort of sort out themselves, and how it can be done is an issue, but it needs to be done. I'm absolutely one with you on that point. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any concluding remarks, sir? Ambassador Ahmad?
Very quickly, all energy sources have very great geopolitical significance in terms of where they are located, in terms of their transportation, and that's why we use the term energy security. If there is a change in terms of the needs of the global community with regard to sources of energy, it will have the same implications. Recall here that coal we thought was widely available, and yet it was a bone of contention between France and Germany and led to the loss of Alsace-Lorraine and all the issues, which led finally to the European Union, because it started as a coal and steel community because they had to cooperate rather than compete. And this is where we are finally going. We should be going. We had a vision. India has a vision of energy security founded on cooperation rather than competition. We said that where producers and consumers can sit together. The vision that we had, and here I will be a bit idealistic, if my renewable energy people can be idealistic, so can we, fossil fuel people can be idealistic. And this was the point, that actually producers and consumers are on the same side. He needs a market and I need his resource. We really need to talk to each other. He needs a stable, I need stability there, and he needs an assured market. We are on the same side. And this is what we were talking about. We have, with regard to fossil fuels, the International Energy Forum. It's not a very robust entity because you have OPEC on the one side and the IEA on the other, which have a degree of competition with each other. But ultimately, a degree of cooperation. For example, the coal producers. How can we produce coal, clean coal bed methane technology? Or again, technology which perhaps Russia has with regard to penetration into our hard rock in the Deccan Trap. So there are areas of cooperation where if India, China, Japan, Korea, and Russia can work together, we can really come up with numerous ideas relating to technology. So raw material on the one hand, yes. For example, you know how sensitive uranium is. You have a nuclear suppliers group, and you know again the political implications of that. So there will always be sensitivities with regard to rare earths and the various minerals that are required. There are sensitivities with regard to water. Even as I speak to you, there is a body of opinion in our country which says that a large part of the Kashmir issue and Ladakh between India and China is because of the water resources available there. You and I don't need to buy this, but it is being asserted very robustly in print. So there are all these sensitivities. Can we posit an alternative scenario of cooperation, of sitting together, engaging with each other? You know, in India, we had the round table conferences. It's a very, very long ago, 2006. It was something never imagined, that actually producers and consumers can sit together in the same room and come up with a joint document of cooperation. We've done that, and it can be done. Rather than imagine if producers sit together and consumers sit in the same room, in a different room, you're going to have competition. Then you will say that, look, I have to get the best price and this guy has to pay for it. Actually, there is now a recognition that you don't need the highest price. What you need is a stable supply over a period of time. You need an assured market. So, and I think this is the way we will finally need to go. And this is where diplomats can work together, just as we are working together with regard to renewable energy. Renewable energy has this problem that the politician faces election every 2 years in the United States, and in our case, every few months in our states. So you have a very intense political pressure for the here and now rather than the long term.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Ahmad, Subhomoy Bhattacharjee, and Praveen Gupta. I mean, you have really, in the short time that we had, covered a huge amount of space on the energy issue. I mean, there is so much more that we could continue to discuss, but I think we have been able to get a flavor of the geopolitics, a flavor of the climate concerns, and a flavor of the business industry and the pressures that are now coming in to make it a more realistic mix. So while we don't look at any silver bullet to either the energy problem or the climate problem, we certainly look at a bullet which is gradually becoming silver. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you all once again, and pass us back to Prasenjit to carry on the conference.
Thank you, Ambassador Sarna. Thank you, Ambassador Ahmed. Thank you, Subhomoy. Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Thanks so much.